So I'm going to kick off everybody with just an overview of the HRCI perspective on the joint funding scheme to give you some background and context before we move into the Aoife and Amie's presentations from the HRB perspective. So just a very quick history there of the joint funding scheme. It was launched in 2006 by HRCI, who was then MRCG, if you remember, and to date, 134 awards have been made under the scheme, and that makes up about 13.5 million each of HRB and charity funding. The chart that you have in front of you there just shows the pattern of applications to the joint funding scheme over time. So after a dip in 2014, you can see that we've had a significant increase in applications to the scheme, and that's being continued this year, which is great news, and we're delighted to have so many people interested in participating this time round. So in terms of HRCI's role in the joint funding scheme, from our point of view in HRCI, we are the first point of contact for queries about the scheme, and many of you have been in touch with me over the last few months to find out more about the scheme, and I've been happy to give you loads of information. We also are input into the content of scheme documents and the application form, so we liaise very closely with the HRB on preparing the scheme documentation and the application forms, and we also manage the charity involvement in the scheme. So our role is to support you as charities as you go through the scheme on a step-by-step basis. We also support you through the process and provide regular updates, and we assist in disseminating charity calls. So some of you who have already have calls published, we have liaised with us, and we put them up on our website as well as link to your calls on your own website. And Linda also tweets about calls as they come up. We prepare information about the scheme, so we've prepared a charity FAQ, which is available on our website. We've prepared a video about the scheme, and we've prepared a fact sheet and other documents as necessary. And we also work to strengthen PPI in the scheme. So we have a PPI shared learning group, which some of you are members of. We've prepared case studies on PPI in the scheme, and we support the training of PPI panel members for the joint selection panel. We also support charity attendance at the joint selection panel meeting, and we work to capture feedback after each round and agree changes with the HRB, which is a very important part of the process. So what's special about the joint funding scheme? It's a unique scheme, so there's no similar co-funding scheme between charities and health research funders in Ireland, the UK and the EU. And as such, the scheme represents a chance for charities to maximise the value of research funding. And this is really important to get full value out of the funding you have available for research. It's open to almost all types of research with the exception of clinical trials, and it is an opportunity for charities who represent under-researched conditions to access funding for their research agendas. PPI is very strong in the scheme. It's an integral part of the scheme from the very get-go. The scheme promotes patient-focused research and research that is of key relevance to charities and to patients. The scheme has a high success rate. It has historically had high impact, and it is of high quality. And really what's important as well about the scheme is that it's flexible and responsive to the needs of charities. So a key feature of the scheme is that it has, as I said, been very flexible, and we work to respond to the needs of charities and gather the needs of charities after each round of the scheme. So some of the things that have been introduced in the scheme as a result of responding to the needs of charities is the arrangement for smaller charities to access 75% funding from the HRB. So this is for charities whose revenue or reserves are less than 150,000. And in that case, the charity can contribute 25% of funding for a successful project, and the HRB contributes 75%. you can access funding outside of Ireland, especially when there's no research capacity in Ireland, and that is also very relevant for the smaller charities. There's a potential for collaboration between charities on national and international basis. PPI has been introduced as an integral part of the scheme. We also introduced the right of reply so that researchers can reply to the feedback they receive from international peer review, and that's taken into account in the joint selection panel. Charities are also able to submit +1 applications, so that's the ability to submit one more application than the charity can afford to fund. So if you have funding for 2 projects, but you have 3 highly rated projects as a result of international peer review, you can submit 3 to the HRB panel, and the top 2 ranked projects can be funded. So that's a very important development. Charities also have the opportunity to input into the appointment of panel members, and they can observe the joint selection panel meeting. And applicants are no longer required to score on the relevance of projects to patients. So in terms of how the scheme works, the text in red there shows where we are now. So the first phase is now ongoing, which is where the charities publish their calls and invite applications to be submitted to them. So that's ongoing at the moment. After that phase, and charities review and shortlist and manage the international peer review and public review where applicable. Applicants have the right to respond, and charities then undergo an internal selection process to select applications to submit to the HRB. So basically the phases there are organising international peer review, organising the right to respond, and then on the basis of that, selecting applications to go forward to the HRB. Then there is a joint selection panel where applications are considered at a joint selection panel meeting, and each application is assessed by scientific and PPI reviewers who give a scientific score and a PPI rating, and charities can be observers at these panel meetings. And finally, there's HRB board approval, where the HRB board approves successful projects and contracts are issued. So what are the challenges, and how do we support charities who are participating in the joint funding scheme? Some of the challenges are around eligibility and legal requirements. So we work to give targeted information to charities on what are the eligibility requirements for charities, what is any legal or financial requirements for charities. We also provide support for co-funding, just to alert charities to the need for co-funding partner approval, which is one of the steps that charities have to undertake to take part in the scheme. Another challenge is organising peer review and managing conflicts of interest in peer review. And we support charities in and the HRB have also issued guidance for charities on identifying and recruiting peer reviewers, and there's templates for completing conflict of interest declarations. The charities have to undertake their own selection process, and they also have to, charities are responsible for submitting the applications to the HRB, and we provide group and one-to-one support on the application process, where to start, what to do next, and take charities through on a step-by-step basis through the application process to offer as much support as we possibly can. We also help with the preparing and publishing of calls to applicants. So we have liaise with charities as they prepare their calls, and help with the dissemination of calls as well. Some charities have identified understanding scientific and PPI review and scoring at the joint selection panel meeting as a challenge, and in this round of the scheme, the HRB and ourselves have worked to clarify the review and scoring systems, and this is described in the Instructions to Charities document, which is a document I really recommend. If you haven't read it, definitely give it a good read. And finally, some of the challenges surround if you're collaborating with international host institutions and HRB contractual requirements. And again, the HRB offers support in taking it step by step through what you need to do if you're liaising with international host institutions. So the scheme is both successful and competitive. So we believe we've got a good balance between the high success rate of the scheme, and the competitive nature of the scheme. So an average of 60% of applications that are submitted by charities to the HRB panel have been approved for funding over the past 5 years. At the same time, the scheme is competitive. It ensures high quality research. And it combines the rigorous process of international peer review and assessment by the Joint Selection Panel, which does ensure good quality research going forward. So moving on to PPI then, and this is something we really need to emphasise, that PPI is a fundamentally important aspect of the Joint Funding Scheme, and it is integrated into the scheme. There is a specific question in the application form, and if you look at the instructions to applicants, you can see the detailed question, which basically reads, are you using public involvement in your application? If yes, please describe all public, patient and carer involvement at each stage of the research cycle. And this covers both identifying and prioritising the research question, and the design, conduct, analysis, oversight and dissemination in the research project. Applicants are also asked for each stage to include the purpose of the involvement and how PPI has influenced and changed what work has been planned. And this is really to make sure that PPI is a meaningful and fully integrated part of any research project, and to avoid kind of tokenistic gestures towards PPI that aren't fully thought through. So the Joint Selection Panel meeting includes a review of PPI in applications, and the overall rating of PPI in applications is used to adjust the consensus scientific score. So the guidance that we basically give is think about PPI from the very start. That's something that should be communicated to research applicants as well. PPI needs to be integrated throughout applications to the scheme. And just a reminder, you've probably seen us email about this and tweet about it before, but we have 2 case studies of excellence in PPI in applications to the Joint Funding Scheme in the last round of the scheme. One by Cystic Fibrosis Ireland and the University of Limerick, which was looking at diet quality in cystic fibrosis, and one from the Irish Nephrology Society and the National University of Ireland Galway, looking at immune profiles of adverse clinical trajectories in diabetic kidney disease. And the take-home message really from these case studies is excellence in PPI means integrating PPI from the very start of a research proposal. Sorry, my screen keeps leaping forward without me. So looking at integrating it right throughout the research life cycle at every stage of the research, and also liaising with PPI expertise where available. That's also a big plus in both these case studies. And as well, budgeting for PPI in overall project costings and budget. So just to wrap up then, just to finish off and summarise where we are now. So right now in the scheme, we are in the process where charities are opening calls for applications and sending researchers the application documents as they come in. The calls are available, the current open calls are available on the charity's own websites, but also on our website. And so for some charities, they are also going to soon be applying for co-funding partner status. This is an arrangement that they need to enter into with the HRB, where the HRB approves charities as co-funders. And then what's next? So the next stages of the scheme will be, once the applications come into the charities need to organise international peer review. Then you organise applicants' right to respond to the international peer review. Then the charities undertake their own internal selection process. And finally, the final stage there is to submit applications to the HRB via GEMS. So that's the HRCI perspective on the joint funding scheme, and I'll now hand over to Aoife and Amie from the HRB to go into more detail about how the scheme works. Thanks very much.
My name is Aoife Cahill. I'm Programme Manager in the HRB, and since January I've been looking after our investigator-led projects, which includes this scheme and then any of our PPI initiatives. I have worked on this scheme in the past as well, maybe back around 2014, so I have a bit of a hands-on experience working with the joint funding scheme as well. So I'm just going to share my slides now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on going into a little bit of detail on the key aspects of the scheme. I guess thinking about that, once you open your calls, you're going to start getting lots of queries. So it's good to know those key aspects. And obviously after today, you can come back in with any queries you get that you don't know the answer to. Obviously Sarah's on hand, and then we're in the background as well. For anything like that. So, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on the review process, the selection process, talk about what responsibilities the charities have, look at the timelines, and then I'll pass on to Amie, and she's going to go into more, a lot more detail on the practicalities of identifying peer reviewers, and then also uploading your applications when you get to that point. So hopefully we'll be covering a lot, but as I said, will available afterwards, and we have plenty of time for discussion today as well. So just a little history on the scheme. As Sarah said, it's been running since 2006. And not only do we want to support charities to increase the quality and quantity of healthcare research, but we also want to build up the capacity in charities around research processes. So there's that aspect of it as well. We've received dedicated for funding for this. We receive 1 million a year from the Department of Health for this scheme. Excuse me. Okay, so to talk a little bit about the scheme, I see there's plenty of new faces today, so I think it is helpful to go into the detail of the scheme. And as I go through, I'll highlight changes from past rounds for those more experienced charities. So I'll pull them out as we go through the slides. So the aims, they haven't changed. The aim is to fund researchers and research teams to conduct internationally competitive and innovative research in areas of strategic relevance to each individual charity. And we want projects that will create new knowledge and evidence of benefit to health and healthcare. So what's in scope? So we'll be funding projects of between 12 and 36 months duration, and there's a maximum funding envelope of 300,000. This is the only scheme where we do allow funding to go outside of Ireland. So this is where there may not be the research capacity in Ireland, in particular for some of the rare diseases. So we do allow that here. There's a couple of options in terms of co-funding the project. The HRCI charity can partner with up to 4 other charities to co-fund one project. Also, a HRCI charity could actually partner up with a charity outside of the Republic of Ireland to co-fund a project. So you don't necessarily have to come in on your own as a charity. There is those other options available as well. So what won't the scheme fund? I mean, Sarah has mentioned this. We won't fund definitive interventions in this scheme, and it doesn't fund feasibility studies leading to a definitive intervention. We do have a separate scheme for these that you could come into. What we do fund, now having said that, is like proof of concept that would lead to an intervention study is still applicable. So if there is any eligibility queries from your researchers, please do get in touch. There's a whole list of things that are out of scope. It's basically projects that are not predominantly research. So we're not going to fund just solely or predominantly lit reviews, audits, surveys, needs assessments, say the setting up of a biobank or a patient registry. or just the rolling out of say a health service development. We're not going to fund any of these things without a predominant research element in there. And then there's just 2 other items that we include in all our documents. We won't fund anybody who has funding from the tobacco industry, or we won't fund any research that creates human embryos solely for the purpose of research. So just to look at the budget, as I said, our researchers can apply for up to 300,000. So this includes the personnel costs, any running costs, fair data management costs, equipment and dissemination costs. The HRB will pay overheads on direct costs, and this is paid later at contracting stage. We will add these overheads onto that funding. There is just a little reminder there that salary increments are expected to be included. There was many years there that we weren't paying increments, but obviously that has reversed now, and it is in the instructions for applicants to build them in. So the team, so again, it hasn't changed the makeup of the team. There should be a principal investigator, up to 6 co-applicants, and up to 10 collaborators. Again, this round we're highlighting that option and encouraging, I should say, the inclusion of PPI contributors as either co-applicants or collaborators. So depending on the role, what we have changed in this round, we have a separate CV for if someone is including a PPI co-applicant. It's a much simplified, reduced CV, and they're only expected to include their relevant experience. Before we would have just had one CV template, which doesn't make sense in this case. Another just slight change is we have just highlighted if somebody does have a knowledge user, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, that we're encouraging them, they can be a co-applicant or a collaborator where it makes sense and adds value to the research. By no means, it's not a requirement. And again, for this a knowledge user co-applicant, the CV is much simplified. So you're probably thinking, what the hell am I talking about? It is language that we use in a lot of our more applied schemes. But what we're talking about is it's a person who is in a position of authority to influence or make decisions around policy or healthcare delivery within their organisation. So if they are a team member, by all means, they should be included. And this is something that we include in our, as I said, our more applied schemes, as it has been proven that it as a way to get those findings translated. So we have started in all our schemes. We have started noting that if you do have a knowledge user, please do include them. And as I said, much simplified CV included there as well. So who can be the principal investigator? This is something that you will have to check when you receive your applications that they meet eligibility. And I'm sure you'll be receiving queries once your calls are open if you are working with researchers that are new and that that you haven't worked with before. So the principal investigator they should hold a post in a HRB recognised host institution in the Republic of Ireland, or be someone who will be recognised as an independent investigator, assuming they received the award. So in that case, there's a letter of support that the host institution needs to send in with their application. They should have at least 3 publications of original research. They should have 1 previous peer-reviewed grant as either lead applicant or co-applicant. This is something that can lead to a lot of queries whether the grant kind of meets the criteria. And again, if you're not sure, please do get in touch with Sarah, and if she needs any further help, we're there. And then they should show evidence that they possess the capability and authority to manage and supervise the research team. So if they're planning to supervise a PhD student, they should support that in their CV and show that it's something they're able to do. And then just as per previous years, 1 application per PI. So I have a similar flowchart here as Sarah had. I'm going to focus more on the review process and kind of getting into the detail of how, when the applications come into HRB, how the decisions are made. Amie is going to talk about, as I said, the practicalities of identifying those 3 international peer reviewers and checking for conflicts of interest and that applicant response phase. So I'll focus on that, the last part of the slide here, the joint panel meeting. There'll be a little bit of repetition, but I think that's okay because a lot of it is new to people. So once the charities, you have done your own internal selection process, and you forward your applications into us, we will be signing applications to 2 scientific panel members and 2 public review panel members. So that's another change for this year. From the last round, there was 1 public panel member per application. That won't be happening again. We'll be making sure there's 2 to have a much more balanced review. And as Sarah said, the panel members will be providing a score and the public reviewers will be providing a rating. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a further slide. At the actual panel meeting, HRB, HRCI and charities act as observers, and there will be an independent chair at the panel meeting. Prior to the panel meeting, we do workshops with the public reviewers, and we do briefings with the scientific panel members and the chair. So the assessment criteria, it's pretty much the same. There's one slight difference between peer and panel. But the peer reviewers this is the assessment criteria your peer reviewers be looking at. If you are receiving queries from your researchers, I think it's always good to focus them on the review process and kind of bring them back to that, and remind them how their applications are going to be reviewed. So the main weighting is with your scientific quality and innovation. So that has to be there. That first part, the important research question, that's only looked at a panel. Whether it's important or not at peer review stage, that's established by the charities. The peer reviewers aren't looking at that. It's what's important is that it's important for individual charities. So anything else? We don't yet use PPI as a standalone criteria. It's not something that we have moved to, but we do say to our panel members, for any of their criteria, if PPI approaches are included, to consider them, or if they're missing, to consider it. So they may still bring PPI into any of the criteria. So the joint selection panel. So the panel will have sight of the original applications, the charity endorsement, and Amie will talk about that a little later on. They'll see the international peer reviewers, comments and scores, and then the applicant response to reviewers' comments. And then they will, the scientific reviewers will carry out their review based on all of that information. Public reviewers will have sight of all this as well. So the scientific panel members, we are sticking with assigning a primary and secondary. I know there was some discussion at our earlier workshop about having equal status. But we felt that it is important to have a primary, just so they know that the expectation is that you're giving the overview of the application. That is really the only distinction. Both reviewers do need to review each application and comment on the strengths and weaknesses of the application as relate to the stated assessment criteria. But it is good to have someone assigned kind of as primary, and they'll introduce the application at the panel meeting. And then our PPI panel members, they'll comment on the plain English summary, the relevance of the proposed research question, any public, patient and care involvement in the development and throughout the proposal, the research design, and if there is participants included, they'll comment on that, and then the dissemination of the proposed work. Now, as I said, there will be 2 public reviewers per application. At the discussion of each proposal, this will include a discussion of the level of PPI within the proposal. The public reviewers, they'll read a summary statement when they're invited to give their review, and then they'll provide a rating. And the rating reflects how appropriate the PPI is for the proposed project. So obviously this differs across projects, and we will be advising them that they need to take this into account. just to flag there is a new question in the charity endorsement to really pull out if there was any, if the charities, if you guys have included any public review element to how you select your proposals, that this is your opportunity to detail that there, and we will be directing public panel members to this section as well. So that I think it might have got missed with some of them the last round. So then when it comes to actually how the scoring and the ranking at the panel, following all assigned reviewers, saying their piece, there's then the chair will open the panel to discuss applications with all panel members. At this point, we will look to get agreement on a consensus scientific score, and then you'd move to get agreement on a consensus PPI rating. The PPI rating will be used to adjust the consensus scientific score by applying a correction to it. So we will then have our overall panel, consensus panel score, and applications will be ranked based on the final consensus panel score. So it's taking into account the scientific score and that PPI rating. And the kind of open discussion, anybody can take part in that, not just the assigned reviewers. So that's a very, quick summary of how applications are selected. As I said, there will be workshops prior to the panel. It's still a long way off yet, but I just think it was important to get into it today, so that you know up front, and also it'll be helpful with the queries that you are receiving from your applications to have a better understanding. So I'm going to move on. I'm sure there is loads of questions and we will have time at the end, but I'm going to move on to kind of the charity's responsibilities. And I know Sarah has touched on them again, and I'll go into a bit of detail on some of them. So the first thing, obviously, it is important for a number of charities here today, is establishing co-funding status, and then establishing how much you can contribute and how much you're eligible to apply for. Obviously, then the charities, you're going to open your calls. Some have already opened the calls, managing the peer review process. And I'm going to talk about just submitting abstracts and peer review names to the HRB to check for COI. So I'll talk about that. Obviously, then you're responsible for your own shortlisting. And then the final thing is actually submitting the applications to HRB via our online system. And Amie will go through it today. And when it actually comes to doing it, obviously we will be on hand to support that for charities who haven't used the system before. So the first thing is the charity co-funding status. Now, apologies, we are updating our policy. Now, nothing has changed in it, other than I'm incorporating where there's a charity from outside Ireland. So I did a policy refresh, just making sure everything is still valid and correct, and then we're building in that option if there's a charity outside Ireland. It does need approval from our ET, so it'll be a couple of weeks before I have official final policy that I can provide you. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to get in touch, I'll send you the list of requirements. As I said, they actually haven't changed, so what's up there on our website is still valid. But really important to get in touch early and to kind of start getting the documentation in place. Now, we have given a deadline till the end of January 2022, so there is loads of time, but I'm sure you want to know, obviously, one way or the other, whether you have that co-funding status. So then the next thing is establishing the funding contribution. So this remains the same. So charities with an annual income of over 150,000 can apply for 50%, and then charities with an annual income of under 150,000 can apply for up to 75%. You do need to start thinking about how many projects you can fund, and that will be included in the charity overview. Their kind of predicted income for the next couple of years and stuff will need to be considered. So Sarah mentioned that you can submit one additional, then you have money to a fund, but there is a limit this year that any one charity can only submit 3 applications plus one additional. So any one charity, the most applications they could get funded is 3 for this round. So that limit has been put on. And I already touched on that there about the possibility of co-funding the project with up to 4 HRCI charities or charities outside of Ireland. So submission of abstracts and peer reviews. So there's 2 things here. We're happy to check the peer reviewers you have selected and check for conflict of interest. And if you want us to do that, if you could send the necessary information to Amie by the 3rd of December. So we would need there the name of the peer reviewers and the application name and applicant team. If, when it comes to submitting the actual application next year, we identify a COI with the peer reviewer, the peer review will be deemed ineligible and won't be brought to panel. So it is kind of a good backup to get us to check now, in case anything has been missed. And then the second thing, which would be really helpful, if you do know the abstracts and titles, if you do have them before January that are coming in, that would really help us when we're putting together our scientific panel members. So we want, a broad range of members with different methodological skills, but it is really useful if we know what's the kind of projects that we can expect. And the other thing I think Sarah also touched on it is, if at any time you have suggestions for panel members, please do send them on to us. And that's not just scientific members, public panel members as well. That would be really helpful. So our online GEM system, I'm not going to talk through this. Amy's going to go into the actual practicalities. And then, as I said, we'll be on hand when you're actually doing it. I think it's between February and March next year. If you have any issues when you actually go to do that. So I just included a slide just to remind you of all the different kind of eligibility requirements that you need to consider, and obviously that co-funding partner approval. You need to check that the PIs are eligible, that the duration they've applied for is eligible, the funding, that they haven't gone over 300,000, that the project's in scope, that obviously all documentation is in place, and that the peer review, there's no conflicts of interest. As I said, and anything that you're not clear of, please do come in and ask, because we are here to support. And then just a really busy timeline slide. We obviously will share the slides with you guys afterwards, so you can go back to them. But the key dates are there, so the date to send on any peer review names if you want us to check them by December 3rd, and then sending on abstracts and titles by January 7th, and then also the date that our online system opens. So that's the 11th of February, and it will be open for a month till the 11th of March. Other important dates we have in there, if you want to note, we have tentatively are saying the 5th and 6th of May for the panel meeting. We just need confirmation that all our HRCI colleagues are available on that date, but it'll be in and around then. But at the moment, if there's any changes to that date, we'll let you know as soon as. And then they'll be going to the board in June, and then over the summer we would be negotiating contracts. So most projects will probably start around November.
So for everyone who hasn't met me, I'm project officer. I'm back on the scheme, and peer review guidance is one of the areas that I will take responsibility for in this round. So for the peer review process, the applications are submitted to the charities. The charities then find their own peer reviewers for each application that they get in. And what the HRB offers is a check on the conflict of interest, or any conflict of interest that might exist. So what we are looking for here is for the charities to send in their proposed peer reviewers. I will do a conflict of interest check after you have already done your own conflict of interest check. And we should hopefully be able to weed out anyone that is ineligible well in advance of your own selection panels or selection committees. After that stage, once you have your peer reviews, you would then have your applicant response, or the right to reply phase from your applicants about those peer reviews. And then you go into your charity selection process. And after that, then they come to the HRB. So the charity peer review workflow that we propose, or that we recommend, and for some of you this is going to be a very new process, is that you would create an Excel spreadsheet to track everyone all the applications that you have, and then all of the people that you have requested to do reviews. You would list all of the participants in each application. So that is the lead applicants, any co-applicants that they may have, and any collaborators. You would then look at what they're looking at researching, pull out the keywords or the methodologies they use or their key areas of research or focus. You would then have a look for those international peer reviewers. And then you could also go into the bibliography and reference section of that application as well. That's usually a good source as well. What we recommend is identifying a number of peer reviewers, checking for their conflict of interest in batches. It's actually much, much easier to do this in batches. And then to invite reviewers and repeat until you've achieved 3 reviews. So where and how to look for the peer reviewers. So you're looking, again, for researchers in that field for whatever the application is. They may have clinical expertise in that area. They may have expertise in the methodology that they've chosen or used. They themselves might be experts in the disease treatment or the disease symptoms, or perhaps another area, such as quality of life or something like that. And they may offer a global perspective as well. Typically, when I'm searching, I use PubMed. I find it's the most powerful and the most comprehensive way to search for reviewers. You can also use Cochrane Library or other biomed experts. You may also know offhand of people who would be useful and are in this area and would be effective peer reviewers. You can also look at people who've spoken at conferences or contributed to articles in journals. And then international organizations, people might be involved at an international level. Ideally, you're looking for a blend of peer reviewers. You want them to be able to comment on different aspects of the application. So, for example, if you're looking at, I'm not sure, something that might be looking at the quality of life measurements for carers in a specific area, while it might be useful to have someone who specializes in quality of life, it would also be useful to have someone from maybe a care perspective, or someone who is more familiar with the disease area itself. So it's creating that nice range of experience. So the potential peer reviewer, and I'm just going to say, just make 2 points very, very quickly. As you can see at the bottom here, we have a little asterisk. For applications that are based within the Republic of Ireland, we are looking for international peer reviewers. So they must be outside of the Republic of Ireland. For applications where your host institution or your principal investigator is outside of Ireland, for this round, we have agreed that you could, of course, use peer reviewers from inside of the Republic of Ireland. That has not been the case till now, but we see that it would be useful to potentially create capacity and build experience within Ireland to even have people in Ireland reviewing these applications. So that is one key change for this round. So you're looking for someone who's an expert in the topic or have some relevant expertise. They need to be sort of mid to senior level in their career. And we certainly wouldn't be looking at peer reviews from relatively fresh postdoctoral or PhD students. They wouldn't be experienced enough. You'd want them to have a strong publication record and to be a senior author on most of the publications that they're involved in. So that's, in this case, that's listed as either the first 2 or the last 2 authors within the list of names. They could also have written book chapters, other reports or other policy documents. We're happy to include those in that criteria. And we're looking for some to be very, very active or reasonably active. So with a number of maybe 3-4 publications in the previous 2 years. We were looking for them to be associated with a research institute or institution to hold a position there, or to in some way to be a visiting professor or a fellow. And we're also looking for them to have an institutional email address. It gets a little bit dodgy and dicey when you're just looking at Gmail addresses. So we always prefer an institutional email address, if possible. So the conflict of interest check, and this is where I will come in and help. So for our definitions, conflict of interest exists if the person was involved in the preparation of the application. They would stand to benefit if it's accepted or rejected, it can be either, is in some way related to the applicant or co-applicant at a personal level. So that doesn't just mean family. They could have worked with them previously. They could have supervised them previously. As I said here, it's a former supervisor for the applicant, is a collaborator of the applicant, has worked with them up to 5 years previously. And a potential conflict might exist, which is not covered by the disqualifying conflict of interest rules above. An example I can use is that maybe the peer reviewer works quite closely with industry, and industry may stand to benefit should the proposal be accepted or rejected. That might be another example. But I'm happy to talk through any sort of weird questions you might have about that, or oddball scenarios. So the December conflict of interest check. So ideally what you will do is you'll do your own conflict of interest check. We'll talk through it now in a second. And you will hopefully come up with a number of names that you believe are conflict-free and would be good peer reviewers for your applications. So what you can do is then send those names into me, and I will just do a quick double check just to make sure that we haven't missed any conflict of interest, or where there is potentially one, we can make a decision whether or not it's okay or it would disqualify them. And the deadline for this, the very last day that I will accept names, will be the 3rd of December. So you don't have to wait until the 3rd of December to send them to me, but that is the absolute last day. So you can send them as you get them. I would ask, if you are going to send, if you could send them as sort of a bulk or in batches. Checking a single name every day for the same application is not a good use of anyone's time. So that would be my only request there. And if we did offer it in the last round and the previous round, and it seemed to work quite well, and I don't believe we had many issues when it came to the actual submission. So that's the hope, that we won't get to the submission date and have to disqualify any reviews because of conflict of interest. I will be double checking them again at that stage. So, checking for conflict of interest. This is going to be very new to some of you. For other charities, they've been doing this for a number of years now, and potentially already have names. They know who their go-to reviewers are. I recommend PubMed. As I said, it's what we use here. I do this sort of check day in, day out, so I understand it's quite easy and quick for me, and it may not be for others. If you are having trouble, do get in contact with me, and I'll be able to talk you through it. So what you're doing is you're using PubMed, you're using the advanced search features in PubMed. You're going to build a search, and that's the same search that you will use for every peer reviewer within that application. That should make sense in a second. And what you will do is you will add each member of the applicant team, and you will be doing a search against each member of the team using the new person or the peer reviewer's name. So you won't be searching and selecting as a group. You will actually be checking for individual conflict of interest for absolutely everyone involved in the application. One thing I will say is that you need to be careful about the names, the spellings, and the middle initials. Where we have publications that have multiple authors on them, perhaps if they may have the same first name, last name, it will happen a lot. You will need to be certain that you are looking at the correct person. You know, it's John F. Smith or John M. Smith. That can be a bit tricky. So to point it out to you, on PubMed, you just go to the advanced searching. Breeze through this very quickly. And this is what you'll come up with. You'll come up with this advanced search builder. And it's very simple, it's very logical, and you'll be able to include all the details here that are necessary. You'll see here, you'll have the builder, you'll have all fields, and then you'll have a box to put in the names. So here, this has been populated with the search. So you can see, let me highlight here, that all of these names here are the people who are involved, the applicants and co-applicants of an application. So you highlight that this is an author name, you have the surname and the initial, and you include all of them here. So author or this person, all the way down so you get to the end. And then this is your final field where you have and you will be putting the person's name here that you are searching for conflict of interest. And in that way, as I said, it compares this, the person at the very end, all the way up individually to each person. So we can see here, you'll see your search terms that come up here. So it's all the ors, or Kelly, or Max, and then this person at the end, and Kirby is the person that we're looking for. And you can see here, actually 3 have come up. So I know Anne Kirby here, and then I know Ivan Perry was one of our search names. So they have published together. So in this case, we think we have 3 potential conflicts of interest, so we would not use this person. Another example then is this M. Crane. We're searching against M. Crane. And you can see here, this is what you're hoping for. No items found. If you see this page, you found a winner. You were on to a good thing. So in that way, you'll be going through each of your names that you're proposing. You'll be comparing them to everyone involved in the application, and hopefully you will get no items found for most of them. But what you could find is maybe a single or a number of applications where you have to check the names that are involved, and then you start applying certain rules to see if it's still an eligible person. So in this case, we have Schwartz and Wilson. So Schwartz is involved in the preparation of the application. Wilson is the person you're trying to use as the peer reviewer. And this is popped up. Now, Schwartz and Wilson are both senior authors, if you look at the first two names and the last two names. So we would have problems there. So they were likely to have worked together if they're senior authors. But then if you have a look here and see that they published this in 2008, so nearly 14 years ago at this stage, that would not be a conflict of interest. If they haven't worked together in the last 14 years, we would be happy to accept Wilson as a peer reviewer. We generally say 5 years, 8 years maybe. If it's a single application of 14 years and there's nothing else, I think it's pretty good, safe to say that they haven't been in regular contact. What you can do is contact Wilson and ask them, is there any conflict of interest? And they will be very quick to tell you if there is or there isn't. So that's an example where there is an application or there is a publication, but it's not going to be an issue for us, or we don't think it will. You may get this sort of situation where you get these large international publications with hundreds, you can see hundreds of authors. This is generally not a problem. The names are somewhere in the middle. They likely never spoke to each other. They like to contribute only a very small fraction of the information to this paper. And so again, it's very unlikely to have an issue here, a conflict of interest issue. Again, if you are, say, Diana is involved in the preparation of or involved in the application, and Brian Hennessy is someone that you're looking to review, you can again just ask Brian Hennessy, this is Diana Eccles, they will get a copy of or you should provide that information to them. Do you have any conflict of interest there? So even if you do get a situation like this, it's always good to check. So keep in mind, that large-scale studies may indicate a prior interaction or relationship, or older papers may indicate an interaction or relationship. It's always good to check. And it may be necessary to dig deeper to identify the right person based on an issue. I think that will be the one that trips most people up, where it's two very similar names. One's conflicted, one's not, and you have to be certain that you've got the right person. So just talking about peer review, as I said, that deadline in December, that's the last day I will check for you. If there are found to be conflicts, then when it comes to the full submission, that review will not be considered, will not be passed to the panel. And I'm happy to do all of those checks up until that date, so do send them to me. If you are having trouble even just with the PubMed side of things, trying to create the search, making sure you're doing that correctly, drop me an email. If there's a number of charities that are having issues or are fresh and new to this, I'd be happy to do a quick run through with you. So then we get through all of that, you get through your charity selection, and then it gets to the submission of applications. As with last year, we're going to do this through GEMS. I know there was a little bit of delays. We extended the window last year, but hopefully we'll be able to mitigate for some of the issues this year. And GEMS, for those who don't know, is our online grant e-management system. And it creates an easier way, we hope, an easier way for you to submit the applications. It's quite user-friendly once you get into it. And it cuts down on a little bit of the admin and the issues we would definitely have sending large attachments via email. It does a lot of the formatting for you. It also provides like a validation list, so you know you've attached all of the correct attachments. It increases the visibility of the charity, and then it also increases the visibility and importance of the strategic relevance of the research. And we're able to draw attention to those portions a little bit more easily through GEMS. So in this case, each charity will create their own individual GEMS account. Each application is then submitted separately. And then we have the part A1, charity endorsement is completed on GEMS, and everything else is just uploaded electronically. So you should have a copy of all of those documents now, so you can start working on those. This is simply a list, an overview of all of the documents that we have. So currently we know that part A1, it will be completed online on GEMS, and then you've got part A2 all the way through to G. We do ask that when you are labeling your files that you include your charity name and what the document is, just for ease of dealing with that many attachments. So the charity endorsement, part A1, that will be completed on GEMS. This has a new question this year, which I'll get to. But this involves questions around the charity background information, the strategic priorities, the application details, the strategic relevance of that specific application for that charity, And the new question, question 5, and this was in response to the comments that we got about the peer review or the PPI review not necessarily reflecting some of the information that was requested last year. We now have question 5, which is outline, if used, any PPI involvement in the charity review process that was used to inform or select or used to inform selection or endorsement of applications for submission to this form. So that is a new question. And we're hoping that that will provide a lot more context for the PPI reviewers and the scientific panel as well, and for why these applications were selected. So GEMS, it's grants.hrb.ie. You can find it through our website, very easily available. It looks like this. You will have to register. So the charities will be asked to register with one email address and sort of one nominated contact. For those who registered last year, you can dig out your emails and reset your passwords if required. And you'll be asked for just very general information. The information required here will be specific to the contact person and the current organisation that they're at. And then once you have that up and running, you'll be able to apply to the call once it's open. And we're planning that for the 11th of February 2022. You'll go here to new grant applications. It will give you a list then of all of the open calls. You will go to HRCI, HRB 2020, which is that one there. Click on apply. And then that will take you through all of the documents, that part A1, and then attaching all of the documents from that point onwards. It'll take you through a validation checklist, and then you'll be able to submit. So I'll be issuing a GEMS guidance document, a far more nuanced and informative document than this speed through. But that will probably be in January, once we have the actual forms designed and put on the website to ensure that it reflects exactly what is going to happen in GEMS. So for the charities now, the next few steps is obviously you're opening your calls. You need to ensure that you've applied for co-funder status if required, or renewal of co-funder status by the deadline of 31st of January 2022. So you should know by then whether or not you're going to participate and then whether or not you need to apply. The reminder of the 3rd of December deadline for the conflict of interest check, but obviously if you send them in earlier, that's absolutely fine. The 7th of January deadline for abstract and the opportunity to suggest panel members, so ensuring that we'll get a good spread of panel members across the research areas. And then the HRB application deadline will be the 11th of March 2022. You will have 4 weeks, so from the 11th of February to the 11th of March, to upload your application onto GEMS. But hopefully, given that you have the documents now, you'll only be required to fill in part A1, and then you should just be able to attach the documents as you've prepared them. So we are hoping it'll be a relatively quick process. And then all charities are welcome to send one person to observe the panel meeting. We have tentatively scheduled that for the 56th of May. We're thinking a day to a day and a half. Again, that's in response to a comment that perhaps we didn't have enough time for the number of applications that we got. And given the interest this year, we thought we would schedule definitely for 2 days. And that is currently planned as a virtual event. So if that is to change, we will let you know. But it will be in accordance with all government guidance.